Under the scorching sun, General Patton was inspecting the area when he came across a group of soldiers lying motionless under a tree, as if they had just gone through a fierce battle. Patton stopped and asked, "What are you guys doing? Trying to fool the enemy by playing dead?" One of the soldiers sat up, sighed, and said, "General, it's too hot. We're just taking a little break." Patton glanced around with a smirk. "When I was younger, I made my men work twice as hard when it was hot." Curious, the soldier asked, "Because you're good at handling the heat, sir?" Patton shook his head and replied, "No, son, because I was good at delegating work." One afternoon, General Patton strode over to a tank that had come to a complete halt, half buried in the mud. He gave the vehicle a once-over, then turned to the lieutenant standing nearby. "Why isn't it moving?" Patton asked, his voice sharp. "General, the tank's stuck," the lieutenant replied. Patton paused for a moment, eyeing the mud-covered tank. Then a smirk crept across his face. "All right," he said. "Call in the infantry." The lieutenant blinked. "To push it, sir?" "No," Patton replied, his grin widening. "To take pictures. History needs to see this." While riding around, General Patton noticed a group of soldiers painting something large on the side of an old barn. Curious, he rode over and asked, "What are you men up to?" One soldier quickly replied, "General, we're painting Patton's army was here in giant letters, so the enemy knows exactly who they're dealing with when they show up." Patton cracked a rare smile and said, "Not bad, but how about we let them find out the hard way, instead of giving away the surprise?" Another soldier replied, "Sir, we thought about that too, but we were afraid that if we let them find out your hard way, you'd soon run out of enemies to defeat." Patton burst into laughter and responded, "Optimism is good, son. Let's just hope our enemies can read English. Otherwise, they might come up with something bizarre about my name." During a surprise inspection of a supply depot, General Patton spotted a young private fumbling with a box labeled "Essential Field Supplies." With his usual stern look, Patton asked, "Private, what's in that box? It better be something essential to the war effort." The young soldier, flustered, quickly opened the box, revealing rolls of toilet paper stacked neatly inside. Without missing a beat, the private nervously replied, "Yes, sir. Only the most essential supplies, sir." Patton stared at the contents, then back at the soldier. A grin slowly crept across his face as he muttered, "Well, at least you're preparing for the crappiest parts of war." With a smirk, he added, "Carry on, soldier. The battlefield's tough, but at least no one's fighting this war empty-handed." General Patton noticed a young soldier meticulously polishing his boots. "You seem pretty focused on those shoes, aren't you?" Patton asked. The soldier looked up and replied, "General, shiny boots are a sign of discipline." Patton nodded, then pointed to his own boots, caked in mud and dust from a long day of marching. "So what do these boots say about me?" The soldier hesitated for a moment, then answered, Maybe that you're too busy keeping the army disciplined to worry about your own, sir?" Patton grinned. "Exactly. In the army, we all need help maintaining discipline, and if you don't mind, my boots could really use a little help from you, son." With a mischievous smile, the soldier replied, "Right away, sir, but do I get extra rations for that?" General Patton stood tall, surveying the new recruits. Among them was a fresh-faced recruit with a glint of ambition in his eyes. As Patton approached, the young soldier snapped to attention, eager to make an impression. Patton, with his usual stern demeanor, asked, "So, soldier, what do you hope to achieve in the army?" Without missing a beat, the recruit confidently replied, "Sir, I plan to be a general within 2 years." Patton raised an eyebrow, clearly amused. "Are you insane?" The recruit smiled and quipped, "Is that a requirement, sir?" Patton chuckled, nodded. "Good, at least you've managed to confuse a general." General Patton decided to conduct a surprise inspection at a military base in Europe. His sharp eyes scanned a young soldier from head to toe. "Private," Patton said gruffly, "is that a smudge I see on your boot?" The private, trying to stay composed, replied, "Sir, it might be, sir, but I assure you it wasn't there when I left my bunk this morning." Patton raised an eyebrow. "Is that so? Are you telling me the dirt just decided to jump on your boot while you were marching here?" The private immediately responded loudly, "Sir, with all due respect, I think the dirt heard you were coming and wanted to see the legendary General Patton for itself." Patton stared at the private for a moment. Then, to everyone's surprise, a smile appeared on his usually stern face. He chuckled and said, "That's clever, Private, but next time, tell the dirt I'm not giving autographs." During an inspection, General Patton visited an infantry camp. Noticing a jeep with mud-covered tires but no tracks on the ground, he asked the nervous young soldier, "Private, this jeep was just used, wasn't it?" The young soldier, sweating profusely, quickly replied, "Yes, sir. We just drove it through a muddy road." Patton glanced at the mud on the tires and then back at the clean ground, asking with suspicion, "Then why are there no tire tracks on the ground?" The young soldier stared down for a moment, and then a flash of inspiration struck him. He quickly responded, "Sir, our jeep goes so fast that the mud doesn't have time to hit the ground." Patton, usually very stern, tried to hold back a smile but couldn't help but laugh, saying, "Good one. But next time, leave some tracks so I can see how this jeep flies." General Patton, famed for his leadership and unique personality, always wore his helmet. One day, during a rare break in the action, he noticed a young soldier staring at it with curiosity. Approaching the soldier, Patton asked, "Is there something wrong with my helmet, soldier?" The young soldier snapped to attention and replied, "No, sir. It's just that your helmet seems to have more dents than anyone else's." Patton chuckled and said, "That's because it has to protect the most important part of the army." Barely suppressing a grin, the soldier quipped, "Well, sir, maybe it's trying to tell you something. If it ever starts talking, let me know. I'd love to hear its stories." Patton burst into laughter and replied, "If it starts talking, soldier, I'll make sure it requests a transfer to a quieter job." During a military exercise, General Patton noticed a tank stuck deep in the mud. Never one to shy away from a challenge, Patton climbed into the tank himself and ordered the driver, "Keep moving forward, we're not retreating." The driver, sweating nervously, tried everything he could, but the tank wouldn't budge. The treads spun, flinging mud everywhere, yet the tank remained stubbornly stuck. One of the soldiers outside, trying to lighten the mood, called out, "Sir, maybe the tank just needs a little pep talk." Without missing a beat, Patton smirked and shouted back, "I'd give it one, but I don't think it speaks English." After watching the futile efforts for a few moments, Patton, with his usual flair, leaned back and chuckled. "Well, this tank is just like me. It refuses to back down even an inch." General Patton noticed a young private struggling with his map. Patton asked, "Having trouble, soldier?" The private, clearly flustered, replied, "Sir, I can't figure out which way is north." Trying not to laugh, Patton pointed towards the rising sun and said, "Well, private, if you find the sun, you'll always find your way." The young private looked at the general and said, "Sir, does that mean I only fight during the day?" With a chuckle, General Patton responded, "Well, if you're only fighting during the day, son, we may need to work on your night vision."